I have a friend who worked for the Royal many years ago.
You ready? Ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dina, and I'll be the MC for this afternoon's program. I'll start with some housekeeping points, and then I'll go to acknowledgements. So if you could please turn off your phones, your mobile phones, or put it on silent, I'd appreciate it. For those of you who need to use the facilities, they're through the corridor on my left. And in case of an emergency, we have 2 side doors. If you could exit through the side doors, and the muster point is at the oval across the street. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Noongar land today, and to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land and to the elders, past and present, and to pay my respects to their culture. I'd also like to acknowledge our sponsor today, the Melville Baha'i community. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who have come today to attend the forum in person, and also to acknowledge all of the individuals who are on the live stream platform. So a very big welcome. We're all here collectively to learn about a very topical area, mental health and well-being. And of course, I'd like to acknowledge our 3 wonderful panelists who are experts in the area of family and domestic violence. The format of this program is that each of our speakers will be asked to speak for about 15 minutes, and then we will open the floor to questions from the audience so that our panelists can take the questions. Today's event is part of a quarterly series of mental health and well-being forums where we explore relevant topics with the help of expert panel members. Baha'i communities all over the world are working to engage in social discourse topics that are impacting our communities and the society at large. The program today will be videoed and audio taped, and material will be shared on the Mind and Soul Matters podcast series. Some of the photos will also be shared on our social media platforms. You'll find a number of our previous panelist presentations on the podcast series, on the Mind and Soul Matters podcast. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of background on family and domestic violence. Domestic violence remains a significant and deeply concerning issue in Australia, affecting individuals from all ages, genders, and cultural backgrounds. It encompasses physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, and financial abuse. Domestic violence not only causes an incredible amount of personal trauma, but also has wide-ranging social and economical impacts, contributing to homelessness, mental health issues, and places a heavy burden on the health and justice systems. This complex issue requires a coordinated, whole-of-community response that includes education, early intervention, accessible support services, and sustained government commitment to prevention and justice reform. I'd like to share a personal anecdote. As many of you know, these forums take months to organize. And whilst we were in the planning stages for this particular one, I was called to jury duty. And it so happened to be a case involving domestic violence. The synchronicity was striking. It was almost as if it was validating the importance of this event and to help me understand it better than just simply researching the topic. Serving as a juror on this case gave me a powerful and personal insight into the devastating impact that this abuse can have on both the partner and the children involved. While I was aware of domestic violence as a significant issue, hearing firsthand accounts and seeing the emotional toll it took on the family brought a whole new level of understanding and empathy for me. It revealed the complexity of these situations, the fear, the silence, the lasting trauma, and how it affects every aspect of a victim's life. This experience has shifted my perspective and deepened my commitment to supporting efforts to educate the community about the impact and resources available to those affected. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our first speaker today. Our first speaker is Jane Jarito, sitting in the middle. Jane brings over a decade of experience as a financial counselor, understanding the hardships faced by vulnerable individuals and families facing financial abuse. She successfully led the development of a skilled financial counseling team in the Pilbara region, fostering industry expertise within the community. Her diverse experience involves roles with Perth Metro Financial Counseling, the National Debt Helpline, Rent Relief Financial Counseling, and currently she provides specialized support to women and children impacted by family and domestic violence through an organization called RUA. It's a community service provider in Western Australia, assisting clients to make meaningful changes in their lives. As a strong advocate, she is consistently driving positive change in financial institutions and government services for those experiencing financial hardships. So please welcome Jane to the podium.
Thank you for that very warm introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon to talk about a difficult but incredibly important subject: family and domestic violence. It touches lives across all communities, including our own here in Western Australia. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away. Talking about it, understanding it, is the first steps towards change. So, what is family and domestic violence? At its core, it's not about anger management or issues relating to relationship arguments that get out of hand. It is a pattern of behavior used by one person in an intimate relationship or family setting to exert power and control over another. It can happen to anyone, regardless of age, gender, sexuality, culture, or income level. However, we know statistically that it disproportionately affects women and children. And the statistics paint a stark picture of just how widespread the issue is. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, most recent personal safety survey, an estimated of 1 in 4 Australian women has experienced violence from an intimate partner since the age of 15. And the impact extends across generations, with about 1 in 6 women reporting they witnessed violence towards a parent by a partner before they turn 15. Tonight, I want to shed some light on different forms of this abuse that can take. Put a spotlight on one form that is often hidden: financial abuse. Most importantly, let you know where help and support can be found. When many people think of domestic violence, they often picture physical harm and physical abuse: hitting, slapping, pushing, choking is absolutely a damaging part of it. It leaves visible scars, but the damage runs much deeper. But abuse isn't always visible. It can be insidious, chipping away a person's sense of self. Emotional and psychological abuse. This is about undermining someone's worth, constant criticism, insults, humiliation, threats against them, their children, pets, or even threats of self-harm by the abuser. It includes manipulation and gaslighting, making someone doubt their own reality and sanity. Social abuse. This is about isolation, controlling who someone sees, where they go, monitoring their calls and messages, sabotaging relationships with friends and family, preventing them from working or studying, or making them feel alone and dependent. Sexual abuse. This includes any unwanted sexual behavior forced upon someone. It's about violating intimacy and trust. And it includes everything from unwanted touching to forced sexual acts. Consent is crucial. Always, even within marriage or long-term relationships. Spiritual or cultural abuse. This involves mocking someone's beliefs, preventing them from practicing their faith or culture, or twisting those beliefs to justify the abuse. Stalking, repeated unwanted attention or monitoring that causes fear, following someone, constantly calling or messaging, showing up unannounced at their home or work. Technology-facilitated abuse. Abusers are now using technology as a weapon, tracking movements with GPS, demanding passwords, online harassment, sharing intimate photos without consent, constantly checking messages or controlling social media. All these forms are interconnected, often happening at the same time. But tonight, I want to focus specifically on one form that often flies under the radar: financial abuse. What is financial abuse? It is using money and finances to control someone. It's about limiting their independence, making them dependent, and trapping them in a relationship. Why is it so important to talk about? Because it's often hidden. It can start subtly, maybe disguised as caring or managing a household budget. Victims might not even recognize it. They might feel too ashamed to talk about it. And critically, it is one of the biggest barriers preventing someone from leaving an abusive situation. So what does financial abuse actually look like? It can be controlling all the money, giving an inadequate allowance like a child, or demanding receipts from every purchase. It can be preventing someone from working or earning their own money, maybe sabotaging job interviews, constantly criticizing their efforts, or demanding they quit. It can be stealing from them, selling possessions without permission, or running up a huge debts in their name, sometimes forcing them to take out loans or credit cards. It can be refusing to contribute to household bills or necessities, leaving the victim and children without adequate food, clothing, or medical care. It can be making someone totally dependent, ensuring they have no access to bank accounts, no savings, no financial safety net whatsoever. The impact of this is profound. It strips away independence. It can lead to massive debt that follows someone for years, ruining their credit card rating, and making it hard to rent a home or even get a phone plan. It creates constant stress and anxiety, and fundamentally, it makes leaving feel impossible. How do you escape when you have no money, nowhere to go, and potentially overwhelming debt caused by a person you need to get away from? This devastating reality is powerfully captured in the research of Dr. Anne Summers, adjunct professor from the University of Technology in Sydney. Her work highlights what she calls the choice: violence or poverty. It shows that for too many women in Australia, the decisions to leave a violent partner isn't just about finding safety. It's about facing severe financial hardship. Often, government support payments are simply too low to live on. And because the abuse itself has destroyed their financial security, this lack of adequate financial pathways traps women, forcing an impossible choice between enduring violence or poverty. And this financial trap is one reason why leaving an abusive relationship is incredibly complex. People stay for many reasons: fear of violence, concern for their children, hope that the abuser will change, isolation, shame, and sometimes genuine love mixed with the fear. So how can we help? How can we recognize these signs? Sometimes signs are subtle. Maybe someone seems overly anxious about spending money. Perhaps their partner always controls the conversation about finance. Or they seem lack money despite having a job or running a business. Maybe they seem increasingly withdrawn or isolated. If you suspect someone you know is experiencing family violence, including financial abuse, here are some ways to help. Listen without judgment. Let them talk. Create a safe space. Believe them. Tell them you believe them and that what's happening is not okay. It is not their fault. Focus on safety. Ask if they feel safe, but respect their decisions. Don't pressure them to leave before they are ready. This can be dangerous. Offer practical support if it is safe for you both. Maybe offer a childcare, a listening ear, or help them look up resources. Gently share information that support services. Let them know help is confidential and available when they are ready. And if you are sitting here tonight and any of this sounds familiar, please hear this. It is not your fault. Abuse is a choice made by the abuser. You are not alone, and help is absolutely available. Reaching out is a sign of incredible strength. This is perhaps the most important information I can share with you today. There are dedicated services ready to support people experiencing family and domestic violence. In an emergency, or if you know someone else is in danger, always call the 000. There are 24/7 confidential counseling and support. You can call the 1-800-RESPECT. There's also a chat service available in their website, which is the 1-800-RESPECT.org.au. In Western Australia, we have specific lines: Women's Domestic Violence Helpline, Men's Domestic Violence Helpline. This line supports male victims and also men who are concerned about their own behavior. Crisis care. We also have, for issues related to financial abuse, financial counselors offer free, confidential help with debt, budgeting, and navigating financial mess abuse can create. You can find local services through Financial Counselors Association of Western Australia or the National Debt Helpline, which is the 1-800-007-007. Legal aid and community legal centers can also provide crucial legal advice. Additionally, a unique resource in Perth is the Ruwa Centre for Women and Children in Northbridge, which houses the Kalap service. Kalap is a Noongar word meaning a place where you belong and feel safe. This center offers one-stop hub focused on healing and recovery for women and children affected by family and domestic violence, providing a wraparound support like counseling, health services, legal aid, financial safety, housing support, and links to short-term accommodation all in one place. It is important to note that this service supports women who are safe from immediate danger and operates during business hours. This is a QR code if you want to take a photo, so then you can share to someone you know that may benefit from accessing the services of RUA. These services are confidential. They are there to listen, provide options, help with safety planning, and connect people with long-term support. In conclusion, family and domestic violence in all its form, physical, emotional, sexual, social, and financial, thrives in silence and misunderstanding. By being here this afternoon, by learning more about it, we challenge that silence. Understanding these dynamics, especially the controlling nature of the financial abuse and the terrible choice between violence and poverty, highlighted by the researchers like Dr. Summers, helps us recognize it in our communities, perhaps even in our own lives or the lives of those we care about. Knowledge empowers us to support survivors, challenge attitudes that excuse or minimize abuse, and know where to turn for help. Ending family and domestic violence requires a community effort. It starts with awareness, empathy, and the courage to speak up. Please remember, recovery is possible. There is a path forward from abuse, and dedicated support services are ready and waiting to help people rebuild safer and independent lives. Thank you for listening to this important conversation this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Jane, for shining a spotlight on an interesting part of abuse, which is financial abuse, something that's not talked about often. So thank you for raising awareness on that and also describing the different types of abuse that victims can experience. We might put the QR code on after we're finished so that if anybody wants to go to the screen and take a photo, they can, of all the different resources available to support victims. So friends, our next speaker might be a familiar face to some of you. Our next speaker is Ms. Fiona McDonald. Fiona has said that the principles of the Baha'i Faith have been a guiding compass for her since she became a Baha'i at the age of 20. The principle of equality of men and women is important to her, and working towards that is something she is passionate about. Having worked in an agency, Relationships Australia, where much work was done to try and support both the survivors and the perpetrators of family and domestic violence, she saw the damage that it can create. Therefore, the area she worked in was the preventative side. Relationship education, trying to break the cycle through education, raising awareness and building skills and understanding of young couples getting married and people in committed relationships to learn to do things differently. Fiona served on a national Baha'i institution for over 30 years and continues to assist local Baha'i institutions in relation to family and domestic violence and coercive control, so that they are better able to recognize, to respond appropriately, and to refer people to the relevant agencies for assistance. So please welcome Fiona now.
Thank you, Dina. I think she just gave my talk. Thanks so much, and thank you very much to Jane for outlining the challenges of as we know, for family and domestic violence, all the areas of it. And as Dina said, that one of the primary principles of the Baha'i Faith is the equality of men and women. And this is a real challenge that we have establishing this principle, because there are those who disagree with that, and therefore there's denial and resistance, or they just don't know how to do it differently. So for those working towards this, what happens when there has been an imbalance of power, as has already been discussed, in any relationship? How do we redress this imbalance? I think in society today we're still learning what this equality of men and women looks like, or women and men looks like. I think we're still really learning about it, and in many ways I always think it's quite good to be very open to the notion that we don't actually know what it looks like, because if we have a rigid idea of what it looks like, it may not be quite the way it looks like that. But I do believe that we've advanced our understanding of what a relationship, an intimate relationship, could look like. What are the things that could look like? And that's a relationship that should be based on both having a say in the decision-making, respect is shown by both, care and kindness are features of such a relationship, loyalty, faithfulness, and so on. That give and take in a relationship. So I have a letter from the House of Justice that many of you will know about, and I will quote a few things out of it as we go through. And the House of Justice, letter was written just in March this year, so it's very recent. And the governing body of the Baha'i world, which we call the Universal House of Justice, they wrote this. It says, in the Baha'i family, the married couple are true partners. One is not subordinate to the other. Together, they navigate life's challenges. So that's really the underlying principle. So when there is an imbalance of power, and we're dealing with a person who is using coercive control over another person, very well outlined by Jane as she talked about that, what steps can be taken, and how should we approach such a situation? Now, no behavior around coercive control is acceptable. I think we all know that, we all accept that. And sometimes this behavior has dire consequences, as we have heard. But we must still treat with people with respect, whilst letting them know the behavior isn't at all acceptable. This requires much patience when re-educating, which can take a very long time. I know from working at Relationships Australia, they had programs for half a year. And of course, there's also got to be a willingness to participate in that. At times, people recognize this isn't the right way to behave, but they haven't learned how to do it differently. Naturally, for those who don't recognize it or agree with that, then strong boundaries are needed, and we know all about that. In the vast majority of cases, domestic violence in adult relationships is perpetrated by a male against a female. However, men can also be victims of domestic violence. I think we all know that. So, what to do about that? There is often a debate around perpetrators should be referred to anger management programs, and Jane referred to that as well. And a similar debate exists on whether couples who counselling is also appropriate, and of course the answer really is no. So I want to just say a few words about anger. You may well know that anger, there's two types of anger. There's proactive anger and there's reactive anger. And reactive anger is when somebody says something to somebody does something, and then we react. And we often know that as having a short fuse, or just losing it, or whatever. And so we get angry, and that can take many forms. Proactive is a more controlled anger, and intentional and at times planned anger. So I'll just read what the literature says. It says reactive aggression is defensive, retaliatory, and in response to real or perceived provocation. Proactive aggression, on the other hand, is displayed to reach a goal, whether that goal involves material or territorial gain or social dominance. So therefore, just sending a person to anger management is not helpful. That's not to say anger management skills are not useful, and I'll come to that in a minute. But with anger management, obviously the first step is to teach somebody to pause before they react. So they learn to respond, and then rather than react. But then you also have to give them skills in the awareness and appropriate expression of anger and other emotions. Communication skills, conflict resolution skills, and stress management. Those are the kind of things that if somebody has a short fuse, you engage with them and then you try and teach them those things. Now, when it comes to domestic violence or family and domestic violence, coercive control, first of all, when a person presents with that, there has to be an examination of societal and personal beliefs that support violence. We have to look at it from that perspective. There has to be a change in the perpetrator's belief systems which support the use of violence in intimate relationships. Identification of types of abuse, which we've heard about earlier. Perpetrator held accountable for all abusive behaviors. Challenging of denial, minimization, and victim blaming. Empathy building, understanding the impact of violence and abuse on the family, and often on children, causes great trauma. Non-violent, non-controlling relationship skills, and all the skills that I mentioned about anger management. These are the things that one works with, but it is a change of belief system that has to take place. And as I keep referring to Jane, but as Jane said earlier, there is a difference between verbal abuse and argument and conflict. Abuse is differentiated from arguments or marital conflict by the presence of a power differential. If two individuals with equal power in a relationship disagree or even argue about the matter, it is not the same as an individual using their power to silence, coerce, control, or otherwise harm the other individual. And some of that can get quite out of hand, but there isn't that fear. A heated exchange of views is different from using words or actions to assert power and control. If one partner is afraid of another partner due to their coercive behavior, which impacts on their own behavior, then they are a victim of family and domestic violence. As Dina said, I am involved in assisting the Baha'i community, primarily through its institutions, to help them not only to recognize, respond appropriately and refer into coercive control, but how to educate people. Often people don't realize that what they're actually experiencing or doing is actually coercive control, because people, as we all know, people tend to think unless there are bruises and broken legs and everything there, it isn't coercive control. And people don't always realize that it can come over, as was said, being caring, over-caring, and so on. Just a couple of words about the legal and the law. Is that for the first time in history, there is now a wide-ranging legal definition of domestic abuse, which goes beyond physical violence, as we've heard. Controlling or coercive behavior, which happens Post-separation will also be counted as abuse, and this has come into law May 2024, but not every state. Not every state has that. But my understanding is that in the past, police were unable to arrest a person if the victim or survivor didn't press charges. However, the law has changed to allow police to arrest someone even if no charges have been pressed by the victim survivor. So responses in other jurisdictions internationally, in the UK, England has had coercive control as being illegal for 10 years, 2015. The other countries in the UK followed suit over the last few years after that. And in Australia, different states are at different places. At this stage, only 2 states, New South Wales and Queensland, have criminalised these behaviours implicitly. And the coercive control laws in Western Australia, in November 2023, the government announced that it would take a phased approach to criminalising coercive control. The first step would be to have thorough reforming of the restraining orders Act and implementing training for police officers and educators. So that's where we're at the moment. So how do we break the cycle of abuse? This is really how do we actually break it? And going back to what we were talking about earlier, about the equality of men and women, I believe very much that we need to start by strengthening the family. The family is the place where we need to really work. There's a need for education, as Dina said earlier in my introduction, that awareness that things can be done differently and need to be done differently. Education as well that is accessible, affordable, and not seen as a failure when seeking to help to build knowledge, skills, and understanding of how to do things differently. And from that same letter, I want to quote again, that the House of Justice spoke about. They said, "It is within the family that the individual is born and nurtured, and within the family that individuals begin to learn how to live together with others. The family unit is the basic building block of community and beyond of the entire social order. The family unit, therefore, a society fashioned to meet the requirements of the age of maturity of the human race requires both a mature conception of family and an ability to extend the insights derived from that conception to the relationships that shape the nation and the world. A family is a nation in miniature. The conditions surrounding the family surround the nation." So this is not to blame parents who have been doing their best with the awareness they have. They're often, they've been taught or not taught, and so we must never blame people. But we have to help people to learn to do things differently and not repeat the patterns of the past. As was said, I worked in the preventative area for both in Anglicare actually first and then with Relationships Australia for over 25 years, offering such programs as pre-marriage education, couples enrichment programs, parenting programs, as well as individual programs such as anger management, effective communication, self-worth. One of the debates we always had was, when is it best to engage with people to help to break any patterns or to educate, whatever. And so, pre-marriage is always a good time, before there's a commitment, before they're married, before they have children. The only challenge, of course, is that people who are getting married have already been brought up in a family. They've already been influenced. They've already had, both positive and negative influences in their lives. So the other debate then is, should we go to schools? Should we talk to youth? Should we, talk to help them to look at what healthy relationships? And that I know has been happening. There have been trials done. There have been different programs they've done. But I'm not sure of what the results are. And one of the biggest challenges with the preventative work that I worked in is longitudinal studies to actually prove that what we do beforehand has an effect, and the correlation between those things. It's very hard to do. However, I believe it's an ongoing process, and I think it is really important that the strengthening of the families and recognising, in fact, I read an article a few weeks ago where in the Australian, where they were talking about it's a long time since the government has had any policies around the strengthening of the family. And I think this is something that really needs plenty of attention. As we know, the more we strengthen the family, the less trauma is caused. And of course, as has been already said, it saves millions, if we can strengthen the family. So I'd like to finish with another quote from this letter that I have already quoted from. And it says, "The sound relationships that are to bind members of a Baha'i family are based on justice and reciprocity. Each member must receive the rights due. Each member must fulfill the responsibility owed. According to the teachings of Baha'u'llah, the family, being a human unit, must be educated according to the rules of sanctity. The integrity of the family bond must be constantly considered, and the rights of the individual members must not be transgressed. These sound relationships among family members require conscious cultivation. They require conscious cultivation." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. There was so much in that 10, 15 minutes. I'm grateful that we're going to have it on a podcast that I can listen to it again. I was madly taking notes. But thank you so much for the information you shared and really bringing it back to the family that, I think there is a lot of importance placed on the family unit and mothers and fathers and how we raise our children to be future family, having their own families and the impact that they have learning from them. We've had comments online as well about your presentation and how timely and insightful it's been, so thank you so much. Our final speaker is Wendy Evans. Wendy is a proud mother, a resilient professional, and passionate advocate who brings grit, grace, and lived experience as a survivor of domestic and family violence. She believes in the power of the village to support survivors, to rebuild their lives, and to guide the next generation away from the harm and toward empathy. As a member of the Lived Experience Advisory Group, Wendy provides strategic advice to the Minister for Prevention of Family and Domestic Violence, helping to shape more compassionate systems for all those impacted by violence. Wendy also speaks to the vital role the village plays in shaping the future, not only by supporting victim survivors, but by reaching the next generation with compassion, guidance, and accountability. She believes in teaching young people, especially those at risk of causing harm, that violence is never the answer, and that there are better, kinder ways to relate, to cope, and to grow. So please welcome Wendy to the podium. Are you coming? You're not coming up. Wendy's going to stay where she is, yeah? Or did you want to come up?
I feel like a bit of FOMO with it.
Oh, okay, come up.
I'm guessing about there. Now, where do I start? I wrote, I rewrote, and I rewrote stories, and I have nothing with me today. So I thought I would speak from, I guess, what Fiona and what Jenna had said, and from that angle. So I suppose I'll start from when I was a small child and imagine a 3-year-old listening to her mother being violated by her father, not knowing that's what it was, but at some level feeling it was wrong. As a 3-year-old, we talked about the importance of the family structure. And even as a 3-year-old, before I've been trained in what was good, bad, or evil, I somehow knew something was wrong. And it was years later, after my father had passed, that I asked my mother about this memory, because quite frankly, I thought, well, maybe they were in the bedroom doing something else. Maybe that's what it was. And my mother, to my surprise, was nearly horrified that I had remembered that instant. And the story that I'm going to share is of a 3-year-old walking into a bedroom with a wooden spoon, because that was quite commonplace type of discipline when I was a child, to get a small smack on the bottom with a wooden spoon. So as a 3-year-old, when I could hear my father doing the wrong thing, I instinctively got my mother's wooden spoon out of her drawer and trotted into their bedroom and hit him with it. Now, that was the last of my memory, and I can remember everything in the bedroom. I can't remember what happened after that. It's just little fragments. Which brings me to the children. The children always remember, no matter what age they are, and how that impacts you. Now, for me, I thought I was smart. I was never going to be impacted. I knew what domestic violence was. I was all over it like a rash. I'd grown up with it. I'd grown up with the coercive control, the financial abuse. My mother couldn't even dress in blue because my father did not like that colour. She would get me to cook meals on her behalf that she wanted to cook because I was allowed to get away with such behaviour, but she was not. It would be picked up and thrown against the wall. And then, as a child, I was taught to be the glue between my parents, which actually put a lot of space between my mother and my father because I saw her as a weak individual. And so I never sought any solace in my mother's at all. So that was sort of lost time, if you like, that had to be made up in adulthood, which is very difficult to do once you haven't grown up with the closeness of a parent. And that sort of propels me to now. Years and years later, as a 19-year-old, I had left home at 16 because of the domestic violence and made a stance. I had put myself through university by myself and been pretty much no contact with the family because of the control that my mother was enduring. And then I met my partner and I thought he was lovely. He was so attentive and he listened to me. He thought I was intelligent. He validated all the things that I felt wasn't validated as a child. I was a prime target for someone to use that type of control. Did I realise it at the time? Yeah, there was some red flags. There were definitely some red flags. But I'm like, it's just his mental health. It's okay that he punches holes in walls. It's okay that he punches the car. It's even okay that he threw a slipper at me because I left them in the middle of the hallway. I'm terribly untidy. And he was very tidy. So I always minimised his behaviours because he didn't hit me, right? Because that's what I'd been taught domestic violence was, that was just hitting. That was to come when he couldn't control me later in the relationship. So 13 years later, we separated. There was a case of strangulation. There was a case of holding down. There was a case of bruises, many, many holes in walls. And to what Fiona said about proactive anger, he used a lot of that because in retrospect, he always punched something that he could put his fist through. So in Tasmania, that was a wall because it was just plaster. In Western Australia, it was always a door because, again, you don't hurt yourself when you punch a door. And being an emergency nurse, I'd seen plenty of people punch things and dislocate their thumbs because they, out of just pure rage, hit something without even thinking about it. And then that takes me to the family courts. They'll protect me. That's what I thought. The family court can only do so much, and restraining orders can only do so much. But a village validates your experience, and it supports you to believe in yourself again, because I cannot tell you how many times that I've spoken to people looking for validation that it really did happen that way, and it wasn't something that I did or didn't do. And I can't tell you, if there is something that you can do, is just listen. Don't offer advice. Why don't you leave? How could have you let that happen? One that I get quite common now is because most people think that I'm quite outspoken, I'm strong, I do what I like. How could I have possibly been that victim of family and domestic violence? Well, I grew up not understanding good, healthy boundaries. So when we talk about family, I had no idea what healthy boundaries were, so how was I going to set them when I seen someone doing poor behaviour? I did exactly what my mother had done, even though I thought I was smarter than her and that I would never do that. I gave my power away every single time in the relationship. And it wasn't until I stood up, and it still is happening to a certain degree today. I'm still stalked. That's unfortunate, but it is just what it is. It seems pretty benign. It's at a distance, but nevertheless, I'll probably be watched for a very long time, and along with my children and the subsequent children that he has also gone on to have with another relationship, which is now 4 years into family court and $500,000 in, and they still have not solved their children problems and their assets. So it kind of shows you the cycle of where a perpetrator's at as well. So we have to feel for them in this as well. It's very important because that's where the village can make a difference in not enabling these behaviours. When someone talks about not wanting to pay child support or they don't want to separate the finances in certain financial splits, at the end of the day, if there are children involved, they are the ones that are going to be impacted the most. Whether it's 60%, 40%, 30%, 70%, it actually makes no difference at the end of the day to the children. They will be fine if the conflict is reduced as much as you possibly can. And that's not saying don't go and do what you believe is right, but keep it in mind that sometimes that's a commercial, you've got to make a commercial decision sometimes and put a line in the sand. And I was glad that I did that. Did it mean that I was financially behind? Sure. When I left, I didn't have a credit card, I didn't have a bank account. My name had never been on a house. We'd owned 10 houses and my name had been on none. I didn't recognise that at the time as financial abuse. I walked out with no money other than I did take a bit of money out of his visa, which he was most upset about. But I didn't even have a bank account. And I felt in some way that I was doing the wrong thing by him because, I made my bed, I have to lay in it, right? I made these promises to care for this man and support him through all of his mental illnesses, only to really find out that, sure, he's got mental illnesses, but he also has a really unhealthy relationship with power. Power over is the only way he understands to survive in this world. And what a different man he may have been if his family structure at some point had pulled that back and said, that's not okay, that's not how we treat people. So it starts with our children, and I'm glad to say that to this point, my now 28-year-old and 26-year-old, I think they know what type of banshee I could become if I felt that they would show those same behaviours. I told them, and I've told them from when they've been very, very little. I'll love you, but I will not love your behaviours, and if you use a behaviour that harms someone else, I will back the other person 100%, but I will still love you. And I have said that from quite a young age with the children, and my son now is expecting his first child, which is a little girl that will be born in October, and I feel that we broke the intergenerational trauma that was happening. Unfortunately for my brother, that is not so. His daughter nearly went through exactly the same situation as me, and she's now been, I think, about 7 years since she's had anything to do with my brother. So he did not escape that intergenerational trauma. It continued on. And my other brother, 3 divorces later, clearly a really great guy, has probably been someone that just doesn't know how to build that relationship because it has affected us all in different ways. So the importance of family, and that's just not mum and dad, that's everybody in the village, which is why I'm so passionate about the village. It takes a village. It doesn't have to be mum and dad. It could be a teacher. It could be a minister of religion. It could be anybody. It could even be a best friend that you're growing up with, but it makes a difference. I had at school, I did have that teacher who did believe me that the violence was really going on. I mean, I had some standoffs like you wouldn't believe with my father because I was strong enough to do that, but it come at the cost of quite a few bruises. But I would continue to do it. And I was believed, and to the point where even the school at one point would have taken me away from my family had I just said, yes, do that. These days, children don't have that enormous responsibility on their shoulders. The system will do that for them. Had I been taken away at that point, goodness only knows what would have ended up, but I probably would have learnt a few healthy boundaries that it took to my mid-30s to understand, and probably, to be honest, another decade before I could stand firm and believe in what I was saying when I stood up for myself. So I'm just wondering how many more minutes there are. So I guess to close out, as a result of all that, I'm now part of the Family and Domestic Violence Working Group, which reports into the government. There's 12 of us, and we're there for a 2-year tenure, and we look at everything that's sort of going across the table, whether it be legislative changes, reform plans, initiatives and so forth. And there'll be certain areas that we're just working out, because it's only our second time that we've met this year, because we were only newly formed and started in January, to be able to give that lived experience back into all the reforms and also the initiatives, and are they actually hitting the mark? So we hear that there is legislative change coming. So I know in June there's going to be more legislative change coming around coercive control, and it's cleverly to hold lawyers to account. So if they are actively participating and supporting someone, there's now going to be ramifications to their legal practice, which is an area that many people will tell you that lawyers, or they'll say certain people are just chasing money. It's more that the system allows that style of practice, and the longer that you're in court, I guess the more that lawyers get paid, and that's the general sentiment, but it's much more complex than that, right? It's actually the systems, not so much the people. So being able to, for them to be able to have that safety also, to be able to use legislation to stop representing some of the people that will keep people literally tied up for decades in court until the children have aged out of the court system. So with that, anyone that has any lived experience or they want to provide any feedback, I take that back to that group, and we all have that discussion and how that impacts moving forward. So I'm hopeful. There's lots of discussion going around. There is a lot of legislation that has been talked about in all the states, but it's still not enough. I mean, already this year we've had 14 women lose their lives to family and domestic violence, and 4 children. Last year we had 78 women, which is a 1 in 4 every day, once every 4 days, someone lost their life to family and domestic violence. And while it is a gendered violence, I do acknowledge that men do and are the victims. 96% of the time they are actually the perpetrator, unfortunately, and that has a bit to do with that imbalance of power and I guess the family structure and how we view it. Much more complex than that, of course, but it all does start with family, because we all start as small children learning what is acceptable behaviour and how to work through those feelings of anger, and how do we come to some place where it's okay not to always get your own way, which anyone that has a 2-year-old at home at the moment understands it's a very difficult task to teach. It takes time and years, and it's why someone's a child for 18 years. It's why it takes 25 years for the human brain to fully develop. It takes a long time to learn this skill set, and that's okay. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Wendy, for your powerful statement and sharing your story with us so articulately. And we're, I guess, very blessed to have someone like Wendy informing policy for our government. So thank you very much for all that you do and for sharing your story. So friends, now I can open the floor to questions if anyone's got any. We have a roaming microphone. It's a lot of information. Yes, we have someone up here.
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious, has the increased awareness about these issues led to a decrease in domestic violence, or vice versa, or the levels are more or less the same? At least the reported and recorded cases.
Wendy, I think, might.
I can probably answer that. Unfortunately, no, it hasn't. As I said, last year was the highest amount of people that lost their lives to family and domestic violence, and they're only one group that have been a part of the family and domestic violence, I suppose, trauma, if you like, over the years. But what we do now is know that we're now more informed. There is legislation, and as Fiona alluded to, a number of states are just testing out that legislation. It is still quite hard to prove coercive control, which is probably one of the leading styles of abuse that many people will endure, either within their family or actually at work as well. It's rife in community, and that would go back to I don't know, potentially the family and how our relationship with power. So unfortunately, no, but everywhere's working hard. The police are now got in-depth training that they didn't have. They do play acting now, so when they go to scenarios, they don't miss, or they have a higher chance of not getting the people mixed up and thinking the victim's the perpetrator and the perpetrator's the victim. So they're actually, last year, started doing role-playing as a part of their teachings, because it is extraordinarily difficult to, as a policeman, you can imagine rocking up and, to a situation that's highly volatile and then trying to make a judgment call on where it's all at. And, so I'd love to say yes, but no.
Can I just also say I wonder whether there's an increase simply because of the awareness coming, that people are becoming more and more aware of what domestic violence looks like. And it's not just physical, there's more to it. Therefore, there could be an increased number I'm just suspecting. So I think it'll be a while before it actually, if indeed, when the awareness of it not being acceptable, that then it be managed after that. So, I wonder.
Okay, we have a couple of hands up here in the front, so Courtney and then...
Thank you so... Is it on now?
Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing, especially Wendy, for your vulnerability and sharing with us. I wanted to ask a bit about the sort of the signs and red flags, particularly around coercive control, because something that stood out to me about your story, Wendy, was like those examples you gave, for example, around the slippers and kind of dismissing that as, oh, he was very tidy and I wasn't, And I guess how can we help not just victims, but family and friends that are observing behaviour to more critically analyse signs and not be so accepting. I think it can be really difficult, and I obviously don't want to give too many details away, but I just know of some stories of people where they'll say things like, oh, my partner's too busy to help with the baby, or things like that. But if you actually dug a bit deeper, you'd see, oh, there's actually an issue going on there. They're not just busy. So how can we all, I guess, as like family and friends, more critically analyse signs and not just be sort of accepting of things that might appear normal, but they're actually not?
I think there's probably two people that can answer this. Probably from my lived experience, there was a lot of coercive control. I had a very, very dear friend say to me that I changed my demure when he came into the room, and I become very submissive, whereas not like that when I was just with her. And I took that as a validation point post, but quite often coercive control is retrospect. It's once you've left the relationship, it becomes more and more visible to you, and then you start to have to unpack all the ways that you were controlled. So I'll share a very intimate coercive control that I experienced was around sexual intimacy. I was forced to do and watch certain things, and I thought that was part of what a healthy relationship was, because I was just appeasing him. However, I have never had any desire to repeat those types of things, and I had a very unhealthy relationship with sexuality, and I realised that he had developed that in over a period of time, and that was probably the direct result of his addiction to porn and how he's seen women in an intimate space. And I allowed all sorts of things that degraded me. And to think about that now, to start with, there was a lot of shame. So there's a lot of shame around coercive control. So if someone is apologising for the behaviours, or they just need to do better for their husband or their wife, It's their job to look after the children because he earns the money, or vice versa. It can be male or female with coercive control. There's a higher percentage of females in that space to, say, physical violence, where it's much higher with men. So it's just being there and listening and just asking maybe the question of, how does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? Because if someone had asked me that over and over again, I would have told them they'd make me feel terrible. That I was always subjected to that. Or all of a sudden I was trying to do my masters, and for the love of money, he would love to move. Usually after I'd paid for it, but before we'd completed. And like, we moved house every 12 months, and now looking back, I realised that was actually a great form of control, because I was always packing up the house, looking after the children, moving to the next house and so forth. And that wasn't through any financial reason to do that, but it's very subtle. But it's the imbalance of power. And if you feel that it's having a conversation, if they're always giving their power away, then there's something not quite right. And it's time. You know, they may never leave the perpetrator, but having a great friend to listen to is the best thing that you can do.
Okay. Thank you. Sahwa, did you want to direct your question to a particular panelist, or?
Just a comment and a question. Thank you so much for your courage and authenticity, Wendy, and for all the information. And I love the term village that you use, because we always use it. It takes a village to raise a child. But in domestic violence, I never matched it, that yes, it's for domestic violence also it takes a village. So thank you for that. I just wonder that in the newly formed group that you have, the 2-year, 10-year, is there someone like Fiona, and I'm not creating job for you, honestly, but I'm just, as a consultative, educational consultative role, that when you are pushing the policy and procedure forward, education will be a part of it. So for the parents, for the partners, for newlyweds, all that sort of stuff.
Sure. So as a part of the group, and it's so we bring in the lived experience part, if you like. It's a whole 360, right? And we're just a slice of a part of that pie. So there is reforms coming in and education about first responders, professionals like psychologists, and they've kind of got a group that they're semi in between those two. So teachers, nurse, police. I'll sort of sit in the middle. So there's a whole reform around recognising and responding and supporting. And there is a group that is doing that. There's a whole task force that was put together as a part of the government's strategy, and that's what informed to create the Lived and Family Response group that I'm now sitting in. So they recognised that was a piece that's missing. So there is a huge amount of people that are at the point of input, if you like, and the same with the legislative. We don't write it, we review it and give our response back to, this is how it's playing out in the courts, you know, at this point in time. Because well-intentioned legislation sometimes, one of the areas that they're looking at in reform is system abuse. For every great system, there's always the ability to misconstrue it and use it to better your own position, and it's just recognising that.
Thank you. I wonder if Fiona and Jane want to make a final comment before we close off. Do any of you want to comment on any of the questions?
I was just going to say that the red flags are the really challenging one, because often it gets hidden and it's not easy to see. I'll just tell you, I was meeting with somebody who's quite an expert in domestic violence, and we were talking about this coercive control, and they said they're learning how to recognise it more. There was one story where somebody went into the house and they saw a dog bowl there, but there was no dog. They asked about the dog, and they asked the woman, she said, well, he treats me like a dog, and I have to eat out of the dog bowl. Because there was a flag there, no dog. Why is there a dog bowl? I'm not saying that happens every time, but these are the red flags that can, and of course, we also have to be very mindful of a balance, that we're not reading something that's not there. And of course, we always fear going into people's houses, interfering in their lives. So there's a balance, but we should also not be aware and to see red flags and then to support. knowing that sometimes if you do approach somebody, as Wendy probably Jane would say, is that you have to be very careful that you're not putting them in more danger because you're talking to them. And so it's really a very, very sensitive way of things that need to be done to be able to handle it. So people don't get into more trouble from actually talking to someone. So no easy answer.
I just want to add it as well on that one because, sorry, is this on?
Yes, on.
Yeah. Say in the financial counseling, it's something that's always hidden and sometimes women doesn't even recognize it at the onset. I remember I have assisted a client who has been married for over 40 years. And what she said to me is she hasn't even opened her own bank account. And only when we assisted her that she's just got for the very first time in 40 years open a savings account. And how did she get referred to us is because of a co-worker. So she's working. She's not even just a housewife. It was just a co-worker. And then she's been employed in that company for, I think, about 15 years already. But imagine the payment goes through an account where the husband has an access as well. And when they found out about this, when her co-workers, her managers have found out about this, then they've asked the question, but they have to make that space really safe because there is shame, especially when it comes to financial abuse. It's something that people will be like people in that situation or women that are in that situation will think, oh, my husband knows more about the finances. I know nothing about that. But why? Because at home, or when they're just the two of them, the perpetrator will be like saying, you know nothing about this finance, I'll handle it for you. So that's been a constant conversation they're having. And so the victim survivor actually believed to herself that she knows nothing about it. I think it is very sensitive and very, very difficult. If you really are concerned, I would always suggest to always create that safe space for the person and for yourself as well. That's the very first thing.
And I guess I'd like to say just on the back of that is when you're having these conversations, be mindful that they have spent years and years potentially of other people providing them the best way to go, including their partner who is the controlling person. Please don't give them all the things that they should be doing because you're actually continuing to take their choice away from them. Validating them and supporting them in whatever choice they might make, even if you think, oh, that's not going to go well, that's their choice and their trajectory to learn through that. And as we know, we all learn through, not just when everything goes right, but when everything's going wrong as well. There's lessons in that. So empower them to just follow the decision they want, even if you don't think it's the right decision. It's not for you to say, and don't become a part of, because they'll be very open to it. They'll ask for it, in fact, because they're so used to someone telling them what to do, because that nearly feels safe for them to be told. But it's actually their journey, and it's just supporting them to show up in the bravest way they know how.
Thank you so much to all three presenters. I think we could go on and on. I personally have learned so much, and I'm sure all of you have as well. If any of you feel like you want to carry on the conversation in a more intimate setting, we have a wonderful helper, family psychologist, Sarah McFarlane, who's now waving at us. She will be sitting in the lobby starting from 4:30, so she can carry on the conversation with you if you have any questions regarding this topic. A big thank you to the Baha'i community of Melville for hosting. A big thank you to our expert panelists who have educated us immensely today. And a thank you to our AV assistant at the back who has helped us with sound and audio recording. And also a thank you to the Mental Health Forum's organizing task force. Please visit the Melville Baha'i Instagram and Facebook pages where we showcase activities in our community, including these forums and upcoming events. Our next mental health forum will be held on July 27th, and it will be on the topic of addictions. Please follow Mind and Soul Matters podcast for the panelist presentations that will be featured on there. So our current panelists, it'll probably be a few weeks before their podcast is up and going. Also, we have a bookshop at the back that will be open. We have Maria there that is going to be managing the bookshop. You can ask her any questions. And finally, thank you for coming to all of you and those on live stream. Please join us for light refreshments and fellowship. Thank you for coming.